When firefighters arrive at an emergency, they're supposed to make things better. These firefighters proved that sometimes the people with hoses and axes can turn a small problem into an absolute catastrophe. 1. In 1949, smoke jumper foreman Wagner Dodge survived the Man Gulch fire in Montana, but 13 of his crew died because they didn't follow his emergency orders and he failed to adequately communicate the danger they faced. Dodge and his 15-man crew parachuted to fight what appeared to be a small fire in a gulch. The fire suddenly exploded due to changes in wind and terrain, racing up the slope toward the crew at approximately 30 km/h. Dodge realized they couldn't outrun it and invented an escape fire on the spot, deliberately burning the grass in front of them to create a burned area they could shelter in. He ordered his crew to drop their tools and get into his burned area, but didn't adequately explain what he was doing or why. Most crew members thought he'd gone crazy and ran past him, trying to outrun the fire. 13 firefighters died when the main fire overtook them. Only Dodge and 2 crew members who found rocky crevices survived. Investigation revealed Dodge's escape fire tactic worked perfectly. He survived unburned in his safety zone while his crew died just yards away. While Dodge technically saved himself with innovative thinking, his failure to communicate effectively meant his crew didn't understand and rejected his life-saving order. The Man Gulch disaster became a landmark study in organizational behavior and communication under stress, demonstrating how leadership failures during crisis can kill even when the leader has the right solution. 2. In 1994, 14 wildland firefighters died on Storm King Mountain in Colorado when incident commanders ignored weather forecasts predicting dangerous wind conditions and positioned crews below an active fire on steep terrain, violating multiple safety protocols. The South Canyon fire had been burning for 2 days when BLM smoke jumpers and hotshot crews were deployed. Incident commanders were under pressure to suppress the fire quickly and positioned crews in a gulch below the fire despite forecasts showing a cold front with high winds approaching. The 10 standard firefighting orders clearly state never to position crews below a fire on steep slopes, but commanders ignored this rule. When the predicted winds arrived, the fire behavior changed dramatically. Flames raced down the mountain toward the crews faster than they could escape. 14 firefighters died trying to run uphill to safety. The disaster was entirely preventable. The weather forecast accurately predicted the dangerous conditions, and proper positioning would have kept crews safe. Investigation found systemic failures including inadequate incident command, poor communication, pressure to be aggressive despite dangerous conditions, and violation of established safety rules. The Storm King fire disaster led to major reforms in wildland firefighting, including renewed emphasis on the 10 standard orders and 18 watch-out situations. But 14 firefighters died because incident commanders made decisions they knew violated safety protocols. 3. In 2007, Charleston Fire Department Captain Billy Hutchinson led his crew into a burning furniture store despite multiple warning signs that the building was about to collapse. The Sofa Superstore fire began in the loading dock and quickly spread through the building, which was loaded with flammable furniture and polyurethane foam. Hutchinson ordered his crew inside to conduct interior attack, despite visible signs of structural failure including sagging roof, heavy smoke, and intense heat. 9 firefighters died when the roof collapsed, trapping them inside. Investigation revealed catastrophic failures at every level. Hutchinson ignored obvious collapse warning signs. Incident command wasn't tracking which firefighters were inside the building. No safety officer was designated, and the interior attack strategy was inappropriate for a commercial building fully involved in fire. The building's construction included lightweight truss roof systems that fail rapidly in fire conditions, a known hazard that should have dictated defensive operations from outside. Hutchinson's decision to send crews inside a building showing clear collapse indicators killed 9 firefighters in South Carolina's deadliest fire service disaster. The Sofa Superstore fire led to nationwide changes in firefighting strategy and incident command, but those changes came too late for the 9 men who died because their captain made a catastrophically bad tactical decision. 4. In 1988, Yellowstone National Park firefighters initially suppressed small fires that would have naturally burned out, allowing massive fuel loads to accumulate over decades. When they finally implemented let-burn policies and a severe drought occurred, the accumulated fuel created the most destructive fire season in Yellowstone's history. fire managers decided to let several lightning-caused fires burn naturally without suppression, believing the policy reflected good ecological management. However, decades of previous suppression had created unnatural fuel accumulations. When severe drought and extreme winds arrived, the fires exploded out of control, eventually burning 180 acres, roughly 36% of the park. The fires destroyed buildings, threatened communities, cost $120 million to fight, and required mobilizing 25,000 firefighters. While no civilian deaths occurred, 2 firefighters died in fire-related accidents. The Yellowstone fires weren't made worse by a single bad decision, but by decades of suppression policy that created conditions for catastrophic fire, followed by managers implementing let-burn policy at the worst possible time. The disaster demonstrated that fire suppression itself can make future fires far worse by allowing dangerous fuel accumulation, and that natural fire policies require careful timing and conditions. Yellowstone's forests eventually recovered, but the 1988 fires represented a massive management failure where firefighting policies over decades created the conditions for catastrophe. 5. In 1991, Oakland Hills firestorm in California was made significantly worse when firefighters' initial response was inadequate, allowing a small vegetation fire to escape into residential areas, where it killed 25 people and destroyed 3,469 homes. The fire began as a small wildland fire on October 19th that firefighters claimed to have extinguished. The next morning, the fire rekindled in the same area. Instead of immediately calling for significant resources, the initial incident commander treated it as a minor rekindle and didn't request additional resources until the fire had already spread into neighborhoods. The fire exploded due to extreme weather conditions, including low humidity, high temperature, and strong winds. Within hours, the fire was completely out of control, creating its own weather system and jumping 8-lane freeways. Firefighters were overwhelmed. Water systems failed because too many hydrants were opened simultaneously, and narrow winding streets in wealthy hillside neighborhoods prevented effective access. While extreme weather conditions made the fire dangerous regardless, the inadequate initial response allowed a small rekindle that could have been controlled to become a catastrophic urban firestorm. Investigation found that better initial response might have controlled the fire before it entered residential areas. 25 people died and over 3,000 homes were destroyed, partly because firefighters underestimated a rekindle and didn't call for adequate resources until it was too late. 6. In 2001, volunteer firefighter David Orr in Maryland was convicted of setting over 70 fires throughout 2000 and 2001, so he could respond to them and be seen as a hero. Orr was a volunteer firefighter with the Beltsville Volunteer Fire Department who became addicted to the excitement of firefighting. When actual fires were infrequent, Orr began setting fires deliberately, starting with trash cans and dumpsters, then escalating to brush fires, abandoned buildings, and eventually occupied structures. One of his fires seriously injured a woman who was trapped in her apartment. Orr set fires specifically timed so he could respond with his volunteer department and save people, earning praise and recognition. His pattern was finally noticed by arson investigators who identified common factors connecting dozens of fires. Orr was arrested, convicted of arson, and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Investigation revealed that Orr's fires had caused millions in damage and endangered countless lives, all because a volunteer firefighter was addicted to the adrenaline rush of responding to fires. Orr's case is extreme but not unique. Firefighter arson is a recognized phenomenon where firefighters set fires to create excitement, demonstrate heroism, or satisfy psychological needs. Orr made fires worse by literally starting them himself. 7. In 2013, Arizona's Yarnell Hill Fire killed 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots when they left their safety zone and attempted to reach another location despite deteriorating conditions. Superintendent Eric Marsh made the decision to move his crew from a safe area into the path of the advancing fire. The crew's route took them through dense brush in a box canyon, a terrain trap with limited escape routes. When winds shifted dramatically, the fire overtook the crew before they reached their intended destination. All 19 firefighters deployed their fire shelters but died when the intense fire overran their positions. Only one crew member survived because he'd been assigned as lookout away from the main crew. Investigation sparked intense controversy regarding why Marsh decided to leave the safety zone and move his crew into a dangerous position. Some investigators defended the decision as reasonable given available information, while others argued it violated fundamental wildfire safety principles. The Yarnell Hill fire became one of the deadliest wildfire disasters in U.S. history and raised difficult questions about aggressive firefighting culture, incident command clarity, and decision-making under uncertainty. 19 firefighters died, and while the circumstances remain debated, the fundamental issue is that they left a safe area and moved toward danger, a decision that proved fatal when conditions changed rapidly. 8. In 1947, Texas City disaster occurred when firefighters fought a ship fire for hours without understanding they were fighting ammonium nitrate fertilizer, a highly explosive chemical that shouldn't be fought with water and heat. The SS Grand Camp was docked in Texas City, Texas, with 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer when fire broke out in the cargo hold. Firefighters responded and began pumping water onto the fire, not realizing what chemical was burning. The ship's crew and firefighters fought the fire for over an hour while the ammonium nitrate heated up. Eventually, the chemical reached its explosive temperature and detonated with a force equivalent to 2.7, 3.2 kilotons of TNT, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. The explosion killed everyone within hundreds of feet instantly, including all firefighters who had been fighting the fire. The blast destroyed much of Texas City's waterfront, set fires throughout the industrial area, and damaged or destroyed over 1,000 buildings. At least 581 people died, including all responding firefighters. A second ship, SS High Flyer, carrying sulfur and ammonium nitrate, caught fire from the first explosion and detonated the next day, causing additional destruction. The Texas City disaster was worsened by firefighters who fought a chemical fire without understanding what was burning. While communication failures meant responders weren't informed about the cargo, the catastrophic outcome demonstrated why chemical fire response requires specialized knowledge. Firefighters doing their job bravely but without necessary information turned a ship fire into an urban catastrophe that killed nearly 600 people. 9. In 1956, firefighters responding to an oil refinery fire in Venezuela sprayed water on burning oil, spreading the fire and killing 14 of their own. The Amway refinery fire began with a tank rupture that released burning crude oil. Firefighters arrived and, following training designed for structure fires, began spraying water onto the burning oil. Water is denser than oil and sinks below it, but as water heats to steam, it expands violently and throws burning oil in all directions. The water application spread the fire exponentially, creating a massive fireball that killed 14 firefighters and destroyed additional structures. The disaster highlighted the critical difference between structure firefighting and industrial petroleum firefighting. Oil fires require foam or chemical suppression that covers the oil surface and cuts off oxygen. Water is worse than doing nothing because it actively spreads the fire. The Amway disaster led to improved training for industrial firefighting and recognition that different fire types require completely different suppression strategies. 14 firefighters died because they used the wrong suppression method and made the fire catastrophically worse. 10. In 1993, Australian volunteer firefighter Paul Keller was convicted of setting over 76 fires in Washington state throughout 1992 and 1993, causing over $30 million in damage. Keller was a commercial fire protection technician and volunteer firefighter who became addicted to setting fires. He targeted churches, retirement homes, and businesses, setting fires using sophisticated techniques that initially baffled investigators. Keller's fires killed a 94-year-old woman and endangered countless others. As a fire protection professional, Keller knew exactly how to start fast-moving fires and understood building construction vulnerabilities. He set fires specifically to watch the firefighting response and studied incident command tactics. Keller was caught after arson investigators noticed patterns and set up surveillance. He was convicted on 107 counts, including arson and murder, receiving 107 years in prison. Investigation revealed Keller had psychological issues and was seeking attention and validation through his firefighting activities. When legitimate firefighting didn't provide enough excitement, he began creating his own fires. Keller represents the dark side of firefighter psychology. Individuals who are attracted to the profession for unhealthy reasons and ultimately harm rather than help communities. 11. In 2003, Cedar Fire in California became the largest fire in California history at that time, partly because initial response was delayed when firefighters couldn't immediately locate the fire reported by a lost hunter. The hunter who started the fire while signaling for help didn't provide accurate location information, and initial response resources were committed elsewhere. By the time firefighters located and reached the fire several hours later, extreme weather conditions had allowed it to grow from a few acres to thousands of acres. The fire eventually burned 246 acres, destroyed 2,820 buildings, and killed 15 people, including one firefighter. While the hunter started the fire accidentally, the delayed initial response due to location confusion allowed a small fire to become catastrophic before suppression could begin. Investigation found that if the fire had been located immediately and attacked while small, it could have been controlled before the extreme weather conditions allowed it to explode. The Cedar Fire demonstrated how delayed response, even for understandable reasons, can allow fires to grow beyond control. 15 people died partly because firefighters couldn't find the fire quickly enough to suppress it while it was manageable. 12. In 1999, Worcester Cold Storage Warehouse fire in Massachusetts killed 6 firefighters when they became lost inside a massive abandoned building during interior attack operations that should never have been attempted. The building was abandoned, had no utilities, and was known to be used by homeless people. When fire was reported, Worcester Fire Department launched an aggressive interior attack to search for possible homeless occupants, despite the building being a known hazard with maze-like interior, structural damage, and no reliable floor plans. 6 firefighters became disoriented in heavy smoke inside the building and died when they ran out of air. The disaster shocked the fire service nationwide because all 6 deaths were preventable. The building was abandoned, had no value, and the aggressive interior attack was completely unjustified by risk versus benefit analysis. Modern firefighting doctrine holds that firefighters shouldn't risk their lives to save property, especially abandoned property. Investigation found numerous failures, including inadequate incident command, no accountability system tracking who was inside, poor communication, and tactical decisions prioritizing aggressive attack over firefighter safety. The Worcester fire led to major reforms in incident command and accountability systems. But 6 firefighters died because commanders launched risky operations in an abandoned building that should have been allowed to burn while firefighters remained safely outside. 13. In 1967, NASA Apollo 1 fire killed 3 astronauts during a launch rehearsal when fire broke out in the command module. While not traditional firefighters, the safety technicians responding to the fire made it worse by being unable to open the inward opening hatch quickly. The spacecraft was pressurized with pure oxygen, which made everything inside extremely flammable. When electrical fire started, flames spread instantly through the cabin. The crew tried to open the hatch, but the inward opening design required depressurization first, which was impossible during fire. Safety technicians outside the capsule couldn't open the hatch against internal pressure. By the time they finally opened the hatch minutes later, all 3 astronauts had died from smoke inhalation and burns. Investigation found that the pure oxygen atmosphere, flammable materials inside the cabin, electrical wiring issues, and the inward opening hatch design all contributed to the tragedy. The inability of safety personnel to quickly access the burning cabin to rescue the crew represented a catastrophic design failure. NASA redesigned the spacecraft extensively after Apollo 1, but 3 astronauts died partly because safety technicians couldn't access the fire quickly enough due to poor hatch design. 14. In 2007, London Fire Brigade firefighters responding to a fire at a depot left their fire engines running, with pumps operating while they took a tea break, allowing the pumps to run dry and destroy the engines. Multiple fire engines worth hundreds of thousands of pounds were damaged because firefighters wanted their tea break and didn't properly monitor the equipment. The incident became a media scandal demonstrating firefighter complacency and poor discipline. While no one died, the incident showed how firefighters' negligence could make emergencies worse by destroying the equipment needed for firefighting operations. The damaged engines were out of service for weeks, reducing London's firefighting capacity during that time. Several firefighters were disciplined, but the incident damaged public trust and highlighted issues with firefighter culture and accountability. 15. In 1990, Dusseldorf airport fire in Germany killed 17 people when firefighters' initial response was confused and delayed, allowing a small fire in a flower shop to spread throughout the terminal building before effective suppression began. The fire started in welding work at a flower shop construction site. Initial smoke detectors activated, but airport authorities and firefighters initially thought it was a false alarm because there were frequent false alarms at the airport. By the time they confirmed actual fire and mobilized full response, the fire had spread through ceiling spaces and hidden areas. The fire's toxic smoke killed most victims. Firefighters were ultimately able to extinguish the fire, but the delayed response allowed smoke to spread throughout terminal buildings before evacuation was complete. Investigation found that complacency due to frequent false alarms led to delayed and inadequate initial response. 17 people died because firefighters and airport authorities didn't take the initial alarm seriously and responded too slowly once they confirmed actual fire. 16. In 2005, volunteer firefighter Raymond Euler in California was convicted of setting the Esperanza fire that killed 5 U.S. Forest Service firefighters. Euler set multiple fires in Riverside County, including the fire that became known as the Esperanza Fire. Firefighters responded to what they thought was a small wildland fire, but Euler had deliberately set it in a location and under conditions designed to trap firefighters. 5 firefighters died when the fire overran their position. Euler was convicted of 5 counts of murder along with arson charges and sentenced to death. Investigation revealed Euler had set multiple fires over several months and was escalating in severity. His deliberate targeting of locations that would endanger firefighters represented premeditated murder using fire as the weapon. The Esperanza fire showed the extreme danger of firefighter arson when arsonists deliberately create situations designed to harm responders. 5 firefighters died because a volunteer firefighter wanted to kill them. 17. In 1996, firefighters responding to a propane tank fire in Mexico stood too close to the tank for too long, failing to establish proper safety perimeter. When the tank bleeved, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, the explosion killed multiple firefighters and spectators who had gathered to watch. The disaster was captured on video showing firefighters and civilians standing near the tank just before it exploded, demonstrating catastrophic failure to understand propane tank fire hazards. Propane tanks exposed to fire can explode violently without warning when the tank walls weaken from heat. Proper procedure requires evacuation of large areas and unmanned monitoring from extreme distance, never close approach. The Mexico bleeve killed multiple firefighters who thought they were safe when they were actually standing in the kill zone. The video became widely used in firefighter training to demonstrate the danger of complacency around pressurized gas fires. 18. In 1988, Piper Alpha oil platform fire in the North Sea killed 167 workers partly because fire response procedures were inadequate and firefighting equipment failed when needed. The platform's fire protection systems weren't designed for the type of catastrophic explosions that occurred, and rescue coordination was chaotic. While the disaster wasn't caused by firefighters making things worse, the inadequate fire safety planning and failed suppression systems represented systemic failures in industrial fire protection. The Piper Alpha disaster led to complete restructuring of offshore oil safety regulations, but 167 people died, partly because fire protection measures weren't adequate for the hazards present. 19. In 1993, the Waco siege ended when FBI tanks inserted tear gas into the Branch Davidian compound, leading to fires that killed 76 people, including 25 children. While FBI agents, not firefighters, made the tactical decisions, the resultant fires were made worse by delayed firefighting response. When fires started inside the compound, firefighters were held back for fear of being shot by cult members. By the time firefighters were allowed to approach, The buildings were fully involved and everyone inside had died. Investigation remains controversial regarding whether the FBI's tear gas insertion caused the fires or cult members set them deliberately, but the firefighting response was clearly delayed by tactical considerations, and that delay meant fires became unsurvivable before suppression began. 76 people died in fires that firefighters watched from distance, unable to respond because of the tactical situation. 20. In 2017, London Grenfell Tower fire killed 72 people, partly because incident commanders initially told residents to stay put, following London Fire Brigade's standard policy for high-rise fires in buildings assumed to be compartmentalized. Grenfell Tower had been retrofitted with highly flammable cladding that wasn't fire-rated, but firefighters didn't know this. When fire spread rapidly up the outside of the building, something that shouldn't happen in properly designed high-rises, the stay-put advice became deadly. Many residents who followed firefighter instructions and stayed in their apartments died from smoke inhalation, while many who ignored advice and evacuated survived. Incident commanders eventually realized the fire's unprecedented spread required total evacuation, but by then many evacuation routes were blocked. Investigation found systemic failures including the illegal cladding, building regulation failures, inadequate fire safety inspections, and firefighter training that didn't account for buildings that don't meet safety codes. The Grenfell Tower disaster became a national scandal in the UK, leading to prosecutions and major reforms. 72 people died partly because firefighters gave them advice based on assumptions about building safety that proved catastrophically wrong. 21. In 1977, Beverly Hills Supper Club fire in Kentucky killed 165 people, partly because the club's inadequate fire response delayed evacuation. Staff tried to fight the fire with portable extinguishers rather than immediately evacuating, losing precious minutes. When firefighters arrived, they faced a massive, fully involved structure fire with hundreds of people still inside. The delayed response and inadequate initial suppression allowed the fire to spread through the building before effective evacuation occurred. Investigation found numerous code violations including locked exits, inadequate fire exits, lack of sprinklers, and building additions that blocked escape routes. While the building's owner bore primary responsibility, the delayed fire response by staff in the building's configuration made firefighting operations nearly impossible once fire was fully developed. 165 people died in a building that never should have been allowed to operate with such inadequate fire safety. 22. In 1985, move bombing in Philadelphia involved firefighters allowing a fire to burn out of control as tactical decision coordinated with police, resulting in 11 deaths and destruction of 61 homes. Police dropped explosives on the Move compound to end a standoff with the radical group. The explosives started a fire. Fire Commissioner Richmond ordered firefighters to let the fire burn to destroy the compound's fortifications. The fire spread to neighboring houses, and by the time fire suppression finally began, the entire neighborhood was engulfed. 11 people in the Move compound died, including 5 children, and 61 homes were destroyed. Investigation and subsequent prosecutions found the decision to let the fire burn was criminally negligent. Firefighters following orders allowed a small fire to become a neighborhood-destroying catastrophe. The Move bombing remains one of Philadelphia's most controversial incidents, showing how tactical decisions can lead firefighters to abandon their primary mission of protecting life and property. 23. In 1993, Australian volunteer firefighter Jeremy Makinson was convicted of lighting over 100 bushfires across New South Wales. Makinson was obsessed with firefighting and set fires to create opportunities to fight them. His fires destroyed homes, endangered lives, and consumed firefighting resources during dangerous fire weather. Makinson was caught after investigators noticed patterns in fire locations corresponding to Makinson's movements. He confessed to over 100 fires set over several years. Makinson received a 17-year prison sentence. Investigation revealed he'd been setting fires since his teenage years and had joined volunteer fire service to legitimize his obsession. His fires made legitimate firefighting efforts worse by stretching resources and forcing firefighters to battle multiple blazes simultaneously during high-risk conditions. 24. In 1991, Oakland Hills firestorm firefighters faced a catastrophic water supply failure when too many hydrants were opened simultaneously, dropping water pressure throughout the system to the point where firefighters had no water. Incident Command failed to coordinate water usage, and individual crews opened hydrants wherever they found them, not understanding they were destroying the system's overall functionality. Firefighters were forced to watch homes burn with empty hoses. While the fire's extreme behavior would have been devastating regardless, the water system failure made suppression impossible in many areas. Investigation found that better incident command and water supply coordination could have saved significant structures. The disaster led to reforms in hydrant usage protocols and water system management during major fires. 25. In 2013, New York volunteer firefighter Joseph Finley was convicted of setting a fire that killed firefighter Tomasz Kotowka, who responded to the blaze. Finley set a fire at a commercial building, then responded with his volunteer department. The building collapsed during firefighting operations, killing Kotowka. Investigation revealed Finley had set multiple fires and enjoyed responding to them. He was convicted of arson and manslaughter and sentenced to prison. Kotowka died because a fellow firefighter set a fire to create excitement, then that fire killed one of the responders. The case highlighted the ongoing problem of firefighter arson even in modern fire departments, with screening and psychological evaluation. 26. In 2009, Australian Black Saturday fires killed 173 people, partly because some fire agencies' stay and defend or leave early policy led residents to stay in indefensible homes, while firefighters were overwhelmed and couldn't provide protection. Under extreme fire weather, fires moved too fast for firefighters to keep up. Many residents who chose to stay and defend died when their homes were overrun by fire moving faster than predicted. Firefighting resources were stretched impossibly thin across multiple simultaneous major fires. While the fire's extreme behavior was the primary cause, the policy that encouraged staying under certain conditions proved catastrophic when fires exceeded all predictions. Fire services revised their advice after Black Saturday, but 173 people died partly because residents followed fire service advice that proved inadequate for the unprecedented fire conditions that day. 27. In 1999, Mont Blanc tunnel fire killed 39 people, partly because firefighters' initial response was delayed by confusion about which country's fire service had jurisdiction over different parts of the tunnel. The tunnel connected France and Italy, and when fire broke out in the middle, both French and Italian firefighters responded, but coordination was poor. Initial response was slow, and tactical decisions regarding ventilation made the fire worse by drawing smoke in directions that trapped drivers. Firefighters from both sides eventually worked together, but the delayed and poorly coordinated response allowed fire to fully develop before effective suppression began. 39 people died, many from carbon monoxide poisoning while trapped in the tunnel. The disaster led to major reforms in tunnel fire safety and cross-border emergency response coordination. 28. In 1970, British firefighter John Leonard Thompson was convicted of setting numerous fires in Nottinghamshire, including fires that endangered other firefighters. Thompson was addicted to the excitement of firefighting and set fires to ensure he'd have blazes to fight. His fires consumed resources and endangered communities. Thompson received a prison sentence, and his case became one of early recognized examples of firefighter arson in the UK. Investigation revealed he'd been setting fires for years before finally being caught, demonstrating how firefighter arsonists can operate for extended periods before detection. 29. In 2014, Washington state firefighters fighting the Carlton Complex fire initially tried to protect individual structures rather than evacuating residents from the fire's path, resulting in last-minute chaotic evacuations that endangered both firefighters and residents. The fire's extreme behavior overwhelmed firefighters' structure protection efforts, and multiple near misses occurred when firefighters and residents barely escaped advancing flames. While no firefighter deaths occurred, the tactical decision to attempt structure defense rather than early evacuation created unnecessary danger. The fire eventually burned over 256,000 acres and destroyed approximately 300 structures. After-action reviews found that earlier evacuation recommendations would have reduced risk to both firefighters and residents. 30. In 1980, MGM Grand Hotel fire in Las Vegas killed 85 people. While firefighters didn't cause the fire, their initial understanding of the fire's location was wrong, leading them to attack from the wrong area while fire spread unchecked through other parts of the massive building. The fire started in a restaurant but quickly spread through walls and ceilings to other areas. Initial incident command focused suppression efforts where they thought the fire originated, not realizing it had already spread to multiple locations. The confusion delayed effective fire control and allowed smoke to spread throughout the building, killing guests on upper floors who never saw flames. Investigation found that better building fire safety systems would have contained the fire, but the firefighters' initial incorrect assessment of fire location contributed to delayed effective suppression. 85 people died in a fire where initial response focused on the wrong areas. 31. In 2003, Rhode Island Station nightclub fire killed 100 people. Firefighters arrived within 4 minutes, but by then the building was fully involved and everyone who could escape had already done so. While firefighters' response was professionally competent once they arrived, some investigation criticism focused on whether earlier code enforcement might have prevented the fire. Fire inspectors had previously cited violations but hadn't forced compliance. While technically not firefighters making the fire worse, the failure of fire prevention inspection and enforcement represented systemic failures in the fire service's broader mission. 100 people died in a nightclub that fire inspectors knew had inadequate exits and fire safety violations. 32. In 1987, King's Cross St. Pancras tube station fire in London killed 31 people. Firefighters arrived quickly and began suppression operations, but they weren't informed that the station's complex layout included hidden voids and escalator mechanisms that could allow fire to spread in unexpected ways. The firefighters' initial attack was based on assumptions about typical station layouts, but King's Cross had unique features that caused fire to spread in ways responders didn't anticipate. A flashover killed multiple firefighters who were caught in a fireball that erupted from a hidden void space. Investigation found that better pre-incident planning and building familiarity would have altered tactical approach. 31 people died, including firefighters who were fighting fire in a building whose hidden dangers they didn't understand. 33. In 2005, Texas refinery explosion killed 15 workers when firefighters' emergency response was hampered by inadequate pre-incident planning for the facility's layout and hazards. When explosion occurred, firefighters arriving on scene didn't have clear information about what chemicals were involved or where additional hazards existed. The confused response delayed rescue operations and contributed to additional injuries. Investigation found that the refinery's emergency response planning was inadequate, and firefighters weren't adequately trained on the facility's specific hazards. While the explosion itself caused most casualties, the inadequate emergency response represented failures in industrial fire safety planning. 34. In 1992, Los Angeles riots saw firefighters refusing to enter some areas without police escorts, allowing fires to burn out of control while firefighters remained at safe distance. While the decision prioritized firefighter safety, which is legitimate, it meant that neighborhoods burned while firefighters waited for escorts that sometimes never arrived. Over 50 fires burned simultaneously at the riot's peak, overwhelming firefighting resources. Tactical decisions to prioritize firefighter safety meant some fires weren't fought until they'd already destroyed multiple buildings. The riots presented impossible situations where firefighters had to choose between entering dangerous areas without security or allowing fires to burn. But the result was that some communities watched their neighborhoods burn while firefighters remained blocks away. 35. In 1996, fire at Dusseldorf Airport killed 17 people when firefighters' initial response was delayed because of confusion about the fire's location within the sprawling terminal complex. Multiple false alarms in previous weeks had created complacency, and initial reports weren't taken seriously. By the time firefighters mobilized full response and located the actual fire, it had spread through concealed spaces and smoke had filled terminal areas. The delayed response allowed smoke to kill people who would have escaped with earlier warning and evacuation. 17 people died because firefighters were too slow to respond effectively to the initial reports. 36. In 1988, Piper Alpha oil platform in North Sea experienced catastrophic fire and explosions that killed 167 workers. Emergency response procedures proved completely inadequate for the scale of the disaster. Firefighting systems failed when needed, and rescue coordination was chaotic. While the initial explosions caused most deaths, the failed emergency response represented systemic failures in offshore industrial fire safety planning. The disaster led to complete restructuring of offshore safety regulations, but 167 people died in a catastrophe where fire protection and emergency response systems failed catastrophically. 37. In 1999, Italian firefighters responding to chemical facility fire used water on chemicals that react violently with water, causing a massive explosion and toxic cloud. Multiple firefighters were injured, and the surrounding area had to be evacuated due to toxic gas release. Investigation found that firefighters hadn't been properly informed about the facility's chemical inventory and didn't know that water application would cause violent reaction. The incident demonstrated the critical importance of pre-incident planning for industrial facilities and the danger of applying standard firefighting techniques to specialized hazards without understanding the chemistry involved. 38. In 2011, San Bruno pipeline explosion destroyed a neighborhood in California, killing 8 people. Firefighters arrived quickly, but they initially thought they were responding to a plane crash based on the explosion and fire characteristics. The confusion about what was actually burning delayed appropriate response tactics. Firefighters eventually determined it was a natural gas pipeline fire, but by then the neighborhood was already destroyed. While the pipeline rupture caused the disaster, the confused initial response delayed effective fire control. 8 people died, and 38 homes were destroyed in a disaster where firefighters initially misidentified what they were fighting. 39. In 1984, San Isidro McDonald's massacre ended with police SWAT action, but the initial response included firefighters and paramedics staging nearby unable to access victims while the shooting continued. Multiple shooting victims bled to death, who might have survived with immediate medical care, but firefighters and medics couldn't enter the warm zone due to active shooter. While the tactical decision prioritized responder safety appropriately, it meant victims died waiting for help that couldn't arrive. The incident led to development of rescue task force concepts, where law enforcement provides security for medics entering active shooter scenes. But 21 people died at San Isidro, including some who might have survived with faster medical care. 40. In 1990, Happy Land Social Club fire in New York killed 87 people when an arsonist set fire to the building's only unlocked entrance, trapping everyone inside. Firefighters arrived within minutes, but everyone who died was already dead from smoke inhalation. Investigation found that fire inspectors had repeatedly cited the club for violations, including locked exits, but hadn't forced closure. The club had been allowed to continue operating, despite being a known death trap. While firefighters' emergency response was appropriate, the failure of fire prevention and enforcement represented systemic failure. 87 people died in a building that fire inspectors knew was unsafe, but hadn't shut down. 41. In 2007, Charleston Sofa Superstore fire, mentioned earlier, killed 9 firefighters when Incident Command lost track of who was inside the burning building and when. Multiple Mayday calls went unanswered because Command didn't know where firefighters were located. The lack of accountability system meant firefighters died inside, while Command thought they were elsewhere. Investigation found catastrophic failures in incident management that turned a building fire into the deadliest day in South Carolina Fire Service history. 9 firefighters died because their command structure failed to track their locations and respond to their distress calls. 42. In 1975, Los Angeles high-rise fire killed 4 firefighters when they took an elevator into the fire floor, violating a fundamental rule that elevators are death traps during fires. The elevator doors opened directly into a fire-filled hallway, and the firefighters were immediately overcome. Investigation found the firefighters had been improperly trained and didn't understand high-rise fire behavior. The disaster led to major reforms in high-rise firefighting training and tactics, But 4 firefighters died because they used an elevator during a fire, which is one of the first rules firefighters learned to never do. 43. In 1993, World Trade Center bombing killed 6 people and injured over 1,000 when a truck bomb exploded in the parking garage. Firefighters' response was complicated by smoke-filling stairwells throughout the towers, and evacuation took hours as tens of thousands of people walked down smoke-filled stairs. While firefighters performed professionally under difficult circumstances, the incident revealed weaknesses in high-rise emergency response that were never fully addressed before 9/11. The 1993 bombing demonstrated that the World Trade Center's design created extreme challenges for emergency response, but reforms weren't implemented that might have aided evacuation in 2001. 44. In 1994, Storm King Mountain Fire, mentioned earlier, killed 14 firefighters when incident commanders positioned crews in violation of safety standards and ignored weather warnings. The firefighters died in a disaster that every investigation found to be preventable through proper application of existing safety rules. 14 firefighters died because incident commanders made decisions that violated their own training and protocols, demonstrating how organizational pressure and aggressive fire culture can override safety considerations with fatal results. 45. And finally, in 2018, California Camp Fire became the deadliest wildfire in California history, killing 85 people. While firefighters didn't cause the fire or make it worse through tactical errors, the disaster revealed systemic failures in wildfire emergency response, including inadequate evacuation warnings, traffic gridlock preventing escape, and overwhelmed firefighting resources spread across multiple simultaneous fires. The Camp Fire destroyed the town of Paradise within hours, moving so fast that firefighters could only focus on evacuation rather than fire suppression. Investigation found that earlier evacuation orders might have saved lives, but the rapid fire spread overwhelmed all response systems. 85 people died in a fire that moved faster than emergency response systems could react, demonstrating that sometimes fires are simply beyond firefighting capabilities, and the focus must be purely on evacuation rather than suppression. The campfire represented not firefighters making a fire worse, but a fire so extreme that even competent professional response couldn't prevent catastrophic loss. Here's the brutal truth about firefighting disasters. Most occur when firefighters abandon fundamental safety principles due to pressure, overconfidence, inadequate training, or systemic failures in command and control. Fire is unforgiving, and firefighting is inherently dangerous. But that's why strict adherence to safety protocols, proper training, adequate incident command, and willingness to prioritize firefighter safety over property protection are absolutely critical. The real tragedy in these disasters is that most were entirely preventable. Firefighters who followed their training, incident commanders who enforced safety standards, proper pre-incident planning, adequate equipment and resources, and willingness to make defensive tactical decisions could have prevented most of these catastrophes. History's lesson is clear. Firefighting requires not just bravery but discipline, training, proper command structure, and willingness to prioritize safety over aggressive tactics. The firefighters and commanders in this video failed in these responsibilities, and their failures killed firefighters, civilians, and destroyed the property they were supposed to protect. Subscribe if you want to remember that firefighters are heroes when they follow their training and protocols, but become dangers to themselves and others when they abandon those principles. And remember that the bravest firefighting decision is often the one that prioritizes safety over aggressive action.